Shalom Aleichem Rabbi. This is Rabbi Levin, and this is the Parshas Vayechi Tovshin Ayin Beis edition of the Fear Kashis that is heard each and every Wednesday evening at approximately 8 o'clock, sometimes a few minutes later, on 6:20 a.m. radio, Zeb Brenner's Talkline Communications Network. I am your host, Yehuda Levin. And this week's program, I would like to give a title: Why Tamar Epstien Friedman Hasn't Received Her Get. I would like to begin, first of all, by just giving a shout out and a mazel tov or congratulations to Ezra Friedlander of the Friedlander Group, who I've often disagreed with on his craven support of all kinds of democratic and liberal low-life politicians. But he does some good things as well, some wonderful things. And there was a beautiful, beautiful article about him lobbying for Raoul Wallenberg to be in his centenarian, in his the 100th anniversary of his birth, to be given a Medal of Honor in Congress, or a Congressional Medal of Honor. And he was lobbying for this. And there was a beautiful article with beautiful pictures in Ami magazine. Ezra, do good things. Do good things. Now let's get back to today's very, very important topic. This Sunday, a bus came from Philadelphia, and some very nice sheeple, that means people who are like sheep, good meaning, but they don't know what they're doing, came down to help an aguna receive her get. And who did they team up with? And who is the leader? A 27-year-old schnuckala by the name of Jeremy Stern of the ORA, the Organization to Resolve Aguna Problems. That's the Why You Little Kinderlach, or bully boys, who harass people and do things shaloi kahalacha, whose very charter, for those who have seen it, is anti-Torah and anti-halacha. The same ORA group that recently held a fundraiser in a Manhattan bar from 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock in the morning, a bar that serves on their menu shrimp, lobster, chleis, all kinds of treifa stuff, and a happy hour, mishliker tzachon. Understand, this is ORA under the leadership of Harav HaGoyin Rav Hershel Schachter, who on at least 3 to 4 occasions between Mr. Charnowitz and myself had to stand corrected and be advised that he doesn't know what his little bully boys are doing, and he has to call them back. P.S. Rabbi Schachter at one point committed to Mr. Charnowitz, Chachomim Hizar B'drechem, that from now on I'm going to have the ORA people call you before they attack somebody, because maybe Mr. Charnowitz knows some things that ORA doesn't know or doesn't want to tell Rabbi Schachter. And since Rabbi Schachter is busy giving shiurim and doing many good things for Klal Yisrael and for Kashrus at the OU, that gives cover to Joe, I'm pro-homosexual and pro-homosexuals in the military, Lieberman, there's not enough time to supervise what the little kinderlach are doing. So this never happened, of course. This never happened, which leads us to a question. Was it Das Torah when Rabbi Schachter says something, and if he changes his mind, is that also Das Torah, and is it a contradiction in Das Torah? Because he said he was going to have his bully boys call Mr. Charnowitz, and then he stopped. It's a bitter gelächter. I want to establish my credentials to talk on this subject. In the early 90s, I headed an organization called Get Free, in which I helped a fair amount of women who deserved halachically a get to obtain a get. You can ask Hillel in Shomer Shabbos, the famous Gabbai, whose sister didn't have a get for something like 16 or 17 years, and the husband had remarried a Sephardi living in Eretz Yisrael, and I arranged for a get for them. That's just one case. So I'm not a misogynist, I'm not anti-woman. I am pro-emes and pro-halacha, and pro-reality, and not political correctness. No spin, no chazarai. Having said that, for the next few minutes of this very truncated program, I'm asking the listeners and the viewers, if you have a heta to see this on the internet, then please pass on this important program that you can find along with other archive programs on The Fear, F-E-A-R, Kashes, Kashes.com. Please pass it on to others and join the Torah revolution. I'm asking people to approach this by saying, if chas v'shalom, I myself was in the situation of being pressured to give a get, and these things happened to me, what would I do? And if you're a parent or grandparent of somebody, say, what would I do if it was my son or my grandson? Once you put yourself into that mindset, I think you'll see things with a lot more clarity. The reason that Miss Tamar Epstien Friedman is not getting a get is number one. She ran away shaloi kahalacha one day with their young infant. Shaloi kahalacha means because if there's not a clear and present danger and you don't have a psak halacha, preferably from a bezdin, certainly from a rav, you're not allowed to just up and leave and grab a kid. After all, for sure, besides leaving, that might be a moredes, somebody who revolts against her husband, but the child belongs to both equally. Shloisha shutfim ba'adam. So first she did that, and then she let her husband know in a phone conversation, if you don't like it, speak to my lawyer. So right away we started with lawyers, not speak to my rav, not speak to my Rosh Yeshiva or Shmuel Kamenetsky, speak to my lawyer. To make a long story short, Mr. Friedman, who was desperate to win back his family and to have a shaykhus with his wife and his daughter, came out, and instead of immediately demanding through the authorities that she return to the place where their matrimonial home was in Maryland, agreed, because his wife promised to go for the possibility of reconciliation and shalom bayis. He agreed to a stipulation that was signed that wouldn't prejudice that the case should be in Maryland. He agreed to allow her to have the child for 2 months in Philadelphia. After that, Mrs. Friedman started to run out the clock, to establish facts on the ground. We'll take some time, a month or two, for mediation, which will go nowhere. Then we'll start to go to the Bezdin. Then we'll stall off. We have a new idea. We want to go back to mediation. We have a new program, a new proposal. It's Yontif. And by doing that, the court case, which was supposed to take place within several months after Mrs. Friedman absconded with her child, instead didn't take place almost a year and a half. And by that time, the fear that Mr. Friedman had was realized, and they said, although they should really consider that they should be returned, but the court said, listen, she's doing well over there with the child's well, so we'll leave it there. So, meanwhile, Mr. Friedman had followed the rulings of the Baltimore Bezdin, which in the middle of this process they both agreed to go to and signed. And he twice put off. Once he put off from the summer to October, and then from October all the way to June, put off the situation with the court case. The Bezdin asked both Mr. and Mrs. Friedman to withdraw from the court case. The only reason Mr. Friedman was in court was he got a heter from Rabbi Breitowitz, because it was an emergency, to just open up a file in the court and then to go to Bezdin. And he followed those instructions. And when Bezdin told him, they didn't say get out of court right away, but when Bezdin did tell him get out of court, he signed, he was willing, and Mrs. Friedman and her lawyer refused. Why doesn't Mrs. Friedman have a get? Absconding, kidnapping a child. The entire time trying to make sure during the custody hearing that, listen, the visitation schedule should be that he who lives in Washington should have to pick up his child starting 6 o'clock Friday afternoon, Erev Shabbos, you understand? Which means, effectively, she was depriving him from having the kids on Shabbos. The judge, in his decision, said, both parties are fit and proper to have physical custody of the child. The defendant, meaning Mrs. Friedman, has made minimal efforts to foster the relationship between the plaintiff, meaning the father, and his daughter. The court further finds that the defendant's indifferent approach to child having a mutually awarding relationship with her father is rooted in spite and not beneficial to the child. Mrs. Friedman, it's also not beneficial to the child when you say, oh, we're not going to involve the child in anything, but the child says, the little child who's 3 or 4 years old says to the father on the phone, Hanukkah, have a miserable Hanukkah. or you arrange a candlelight vigil at the exact moment that you know that the uncle is going to pick up his niece to bring him to his brother, Mr. Friedman, in Washington. Thus, the child has to see this kind of chazarai going on, and all the other things. There's no question that Mr. Friedman has the right to think that he's being alienated from his child, and therefore, you understand when such a thing happens, it doesn't matter how many people scream and yell. You have to understand that from the very, very beginning, when Mr. Friedman went to Philadelphia and agreed to those 2 months, he went to Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky, and according to the way Mr. Friedman tells the story, Rabbi Kamenetsky didn't get involved in making shalom bayis or in telling the lady to go back to Silver Springs and to work it out and to go immediately to a beis din, but told Mr. Friedman, you've been disrespectful to Mr. Epstien. That's not a reason that a get has to be given. So what's happened over here is that really it's unfair, because a person doesn't have to give a get until all things are resolved. And for Kamenetsky Shlit, who I have the greatest respect for and know for many years, to write in a letter, everything has been resolved because the secular court ruled. What kind of an example does this set? You go to Arkoyas, so you'll say, he's the plaintiff. He's the plaintiff, but if Rabbi Kamenetsky and others looked carefully into this situation, they understand that Rabbi Breitowitz gave him a heta rightly or wrongly. He was doing the best he could, rabbinical guidance, and he listened to what the beis din said. And Miss Tamar Friedman never listened, never took it out of the court. So you have Rabbi Herschel Schachter, who writes a letter, and he says as follows. He says, if the sage Rabbi Shmuel Kamenetsky instructed that it is proper to pressure the husband to divorce his wife, and P.S. I question, who gave the heta to pressure people who are not the chassan, who is not Mr. Friedman, but his elderly mother or his uncle who's a rav in the community? These YU thug tactics of ORA that Rabbi Schachter obviously allows, does Rabbi Kamenetsky also allow? And when he writes it, if Rabbi Kamenetsky does it, whatever Rabbi Kamenetsky says, it's a mitzvah to listen, because presumably the sage, meaning Rabbi Kamenetsky, received divine assistance in issuing proper instructions. As the verse states, the secrets of God are for those who fear him, unless it becomes absolutely clear that he has erred. So he says that that's Torah, but you could make a mistake. So maybe Rabbi Schachter, maybe there was a mistake. Maybe the fact that Rabbi Kamenetsky has such a korosatoiv to the big philanthropist of the Epstein family, maybe that impacted on the judgment. Are we allowed to question? After all, Rabbi Belsky went back and forth on this thing. First he was for Mr. Friedman, then he was against Mr. Friedman. So which way is Das Torah then? Is Das Torah a yo-yo? This is Rabbi Yehuda Levin. We'll be talking about this more next week. For those who have a heta for the internet, keep your eyes open. There might be some videos.